Most men will spend their entire lives confused. They buy the flowers, they send the long texts, they do everything society told them would work, and they still end up broken, alone, wondering what went wrong. But 500 years ago, a man sat in exile, stripped of power, stripped of title, and he wrote down truths so dangerous that governments tried to burn his words. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli. What he discovered about human nature, especially about women, wasn't pretty. It wasn't romantic, but it was real. Today, we're cracking open that brutal, uncomfortable truth most people are too afraid to say out loud. If you're not ready to have your worldview shattered, leave now. But if you want to finally understand the game you've been losing your whole life, stay. Because after this, you'll never see women or yourself the same way again. Before we go deeper, let me be clear. This isn't about hating women. This is about understanding women. And there's a massive difference between the two. Machiavelli wasn't some bitter man ranting about the opposite sex. He was a political strategist, a surgeon of power. He didn't care about feelings. He cared about patterns. He observed courts, kingdoms, marriages, alliances. He watched powerful men get destroyed by the very women they loved. And he watched cunning men thrive because they understood one fundamental truth. People don't respond to what you say. They respond to what you represent. That single idea is the key to everything we're about to discuss. Machiavelli lived in Renaissance Italy, a world of backstabbing, political marriages, poisoned wine, alliances held together by nothing but calculated self-interest. In that world, if you were naive, you didn't just lose your girlfriend, you lost your head, literally. So Machiavelli learned to see the world without the comfortable lies most people wrap themselves in. And when you strip away those lies,
when you look at human nature with clinical precision, you start to see patterns that are as true today as they were in 1513. If you're ready to operate from clarity instead of confusion, hit subscribe and stay with me through this entire journey. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Nice. Here's the first thing Machiavelli would tell you if he were alive today. Being nice is not a strategy. It's a surrender. And before you get defensive, most men aren't nice because they choose to be. They're nice because they're terrified. Terrified of conflict, terrified of rejection, terrified that if they show who they really are, they'll be left with nothing. So they smile when they want to scream. They agree when they want to fight back. They contort themselves into shapes they were never meant to take, all in the hope that compliance will be rewarded with love. Machiavelli wrote something most people misunderstand completely. He said it's safer to be feared than loved. Now, most people think he was advocating tyranny. He wasn't. He was talking about respect. He was observing a brutal truth about human psychology that still governs relationships today. People take kindness for granted. They always have. They always will. But they never take strength for granted. Think about the men you've seen bend over backwards for a woman. The ones who sacrifice everything, who make their entire identity about pleasing her. What happens to them? They get walked on. Not because she's evil, but because human beings are wired to test boundaries. And when those boundaries don't exist, respect evaporates. It's not a conscious decision, it's instinct. A woman doesn't sit down and think, he's too nice, I'll disrespect him now. It happens deeper than logic. When a man has no backbone, something in her registers him as unsafe. Not physically unsafe, evolutionarily unsafe. Because for thousands of years,
A man who couldn't hold his ground was a man who couldn't protect. And no amount of modern civilization has rewritten that primal code. Machiavelli saw this play out in the courts of Florence and Rome. The rulers who tried to please everyone ended up pleasing no one. The rulers who stood firm, who held a vision, who made hard decisions even when unpopular, those were the ones who commanded loyalty. Not just from their subjects, from their wives. So here's the first brutal truth you need to engrave into your mind. Women don't want a nice man. They want a strong man who chooses to be kind. There's a universe of difference between those two things. One is a choice made from power. The other is a survival strategy born from fear. And she can sense which one you are in seconds. Now, let's talk about the real currency that governs all of this. So let's talk about the real currency of attraction. Not money, not looks, not even confidence the way most people preach it. It's power. But not the power you think. Machiavelli defined power as dominance over yourself, the ability to control your emotions when chaos erupts, the ability to walk away when every fiber screams to stay, the ability to sit in silence while the world demands your reaction. That is power, and that is what pulls people toward you. Machiavelli observed that fortune favors the bold. He compared fortune to a river that floods without warning. The man who builds levees before the storm, he survives. The man who panics when water rises, he drowns. Now, translate that to relationships. The flood is emotional chaos, drama, tests, uncertainty. Every relationship has them. And the man who remains unshaken during those floods, the man who doesn't crumble, doesn't beg, doesn't lose himself because someone raised their voice, that is the man who earns genuine attraction. Here's what most dating advice won't tell you. Women test men, not because they're cruel, not because they enjoy manipulation. It's biology. On a subconscious level, she needs to know you can handle pressure, because if you can't handle her emotions, how will you handle the world? If you fall apart over a disagreement, what happens when real adversity hits? These tests come in different forms. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's an argument over something trivial. Sometimes it's flirtation with someone else, just to see if you'll react. And here's the key most men miss. The test isn't about the content. It's about your response. If you react with panic, jealousy, or desperation, you fail. Not because your emotions are wrong, but because your reaction reveals a lack of internal stability. Machiavelli wrote that men judge by the eye, not by the hand. Everyone can see, few can feel. Translation? Perception matters more than reality. A man who appears unshakable is treated as unshakable, regardless of what he feels inside. And this isn't about faking it. It's about becoming the kind of man who doesn't crumble under pressure. Because when you do that, something shifts. You stop needing validation. And the moment you stop needing it, the less you chase approval, the more it chases you. That's the paradox most men will never understand. Chapter 3. The one thing women actually want. We've talked about what doesn't work. We've talked about the currency of power. Now let's cut to the core. The one thing Machiavelli's philosophy reveals about what women truly want. Here it is. Brace yourself. Women want a man with a mission. That's it. That's the brutal, simple, world-shaking truth. A man who has something in his life that matters more than her. Not because she wants to be neglected, not because she wants to feel unimportant, but because a man with a mission is a man with direction. He has gravity, he has purpose, and purpose is the single most attractive quality a human being can possess. Machiavelli spent his life studying leaders, rulers who commanded armies, men who built empires, men who held the loyalty of thousands. And the one pattern he found across every single one, singular focus. These men didn't sit around waiting for approval. They didn't build their lives around other people's expectations. They had a vision, and everything else, including love, orbited around that vision. Now here's what happens when you don't have a mission. You make her your mission. And the moment you do that, you've already lost. Because no human being wants to be someone else's entire reason for living. It's too much pressure. It's suffocating. And most importantly, it's unattractive. When you make a woman the center of your universe, you're communicating something devastating. You're telling her that you had nothing going on before she showed up, that your life was empty, that you are incomplete without her. And nothing kills attraction faster than a man who is incomplete. Machiavelli wrote about rulers who became dependent on allies rather than their own strength. They always met their downfall. The same applies here. A man who becomes emotionally dependent on a woman, who structures his happiness around her mood, her attention, her approval, that man has handed over his power. And once you hand over your power, you never get it back gracefully. Compare that to the man who has a mission. He wakes up with purpose. He's building something. He's growing. He's moving toward a destination that excites him. When he spends time with a woman, it's because he chooses to, not because he has nothing else. That choice is what makes the time valuable. She feels valued because she's not filling a void. She's joining something already whole. That's the core of Machiavellian attraction. You don't attract what you chase. You attract what you build.
Chapter 4. The danger of revealing everything. Here's the lesson most men are too proud to hear. Mystery is not a game. It's a survival mechanism. Machiavelli warned leaders never to reveal their full hand. He argued a prince should appear merciful, faithful, humane, but flexible enough to betray those appearances when survival demands it. Strip the politics from that advice. Look at it through the lens of relationships. Most men, when they like a woman, spill everything immediately. Their feelings, their insecurities, their childhood wounds, their plans for the future. They believe vulnerability equals connection. And deep into a relationship, maybe it does. But in the early stages, revealing everything is suicide. Here's why. Human beings are wired to value what they work for. Psychologists call it the effort heuristic. The more effort you invest in understanding something, the more valuable it becomes to you. When you tell a woman everything about yourself in the first week, you've removed the discovery process. You've killed the mystery that keeps her thinking about you at 2 in the morning. You've handed her the entire book and said, "Here, no need to read it." And what does she do? She puts it on the shelf. Not because it wasn't good, but because there's no reason to pick it up again. She already knows the ending. Machiavelli understood something most men refuse to accept. People are drawn to what they cannot fully predict. The leaders who maintained unpredictability held power the longest, because when people can't predict you, they pay attention, and attention is the precursor to attraction. This doesn't mean you lie. It doesn't mean you become cold or unavailable. It means you reveal yourself in layers, like a story worth reading twice. You give enough to create interest, but you always leave them wanting more.
The men who do this naturally, the ones who don't over-explain themselves, who don't seek validation by oversharing prematurely, those are the men women, they call it magnetic. They can't explain it. They just know they want more. That's not manipulation. That's understanding the machinery of desire. And Machiavelli decoded it 5 centuries ago. Chapter 5. Why Women Choose Dangerous Men. Now we address the elephant in the room. Why do women so often choose men who seem catastrophic for them? Men who are unreliable, emotionally unavailable, even destructive. This is the question that drives nice guys insane. And Machiavelli, without ever writing a dating manual, gave us the perfect answer. In The Prince, he wrote, "Fortune is a woman, and to keep her under control, it is necessary to treat her roughly." This quote has been butchered by the internet. He wasn't advocating cruelty. He was making a philosophical point about boldness versus paralysis. His argument was surgical. Fortune, meaning opportunity and success, favors those who act decisively. Those who hesitate, who play it safe, who wait for permission, they get steamrolled by circumstance. The man who moves boldly, even imperfectly, commands fate in a way the cautious man never will. Apply this to relationships. The dangerous man isn't attractive because he's dangerous. He's attractive because he's decisive. He doesn't ask for permission to live his life. He doesn't wait for a woman to tell him what to do. He moves with certainty. Right or wrong, he moves. And that movement, that sheer momentum of a man who trusts himself enough to act, is intoxicating. The nice guy, by contrast, is always waiting. Waiting for the right moment, waiting for a signal, waiting for permission. And while he's waiting, the bold man has already walked over, introduced himself, and created a moment. Not because he's better, because he's braver. Women don't want danger.
They want a man who isn't afraid of it. They want someone who walks toward challenge instead of away from it. And when you examine the so-called bad boys through this lens, you realize they're not chosen because they're bad. They're chosen because they're unafraid. They project a certainty that says, I can handle whatever comes. And in a world drowning in uncertainty, that energy is a lighthouse in a storm. The lesson from Machiavelli is brutal. Stop being cautious. Stop overthinking. Stop trying to calculate the perfect move. Act. Move. Decide. Even if you're wrong, a decision made with confidence is more. Chapter 6. The Art of Walking Away. This is where most men collapse. The ability to walk away is the ultimate power in any relationship, and most men simply do not have it. A prince must never be so attached to an alliance that he cannot sever it when it no longer serves him. This wasn't about disloyalty. This was about self-preservation. The moment you cannot walk away from something, you have become its prisoner. In relationships, this shows up in devastating ways. The man who cannot walk away will tolerate disrespect. He'll tolerate dishonesty. He'll tolerate being treated as an option while treating her as a priority. And every time he stays despite being mistreated, his value in her eyes drops. Not because she's cruel, but because his inability to leave tells her he has no other options. That he is so desperate for her attention, he'll accept any terms, no matter how degrading. Now compare that to the man who can walk away. The man who says calmly, without drama, I care about you, but I won't accept being treated this way, and then follows through. That man is terrifying in the best possible way, because he has demonstrated something incredibly rare: self-respect that cannot be bought. And here's the paradox. The man who is willing to lose the relationship is usually the one who keeps it, because his willingness to walk shows that his love is a choice, not a dependency. Chosen love is infinitely more valuable than desperate love. This doesn't mean threatening to leave every time there's a disagreement. That's childish manipulation. This means building a life so fulfilling, so rich with purpose, that no single person's absence could destroy it.
When you reach that point, walking away isn't a tactic. It's simply the natural consequence of knowing your own worth. And when a woman senses that, when she realizes you love her but don't need her, that's when she falls deepest. Because she knows your love is real, not based on fear or loneliness, but on genuine desire. And genuine desire is the only thing that sustains a relationship long term. Chapter 7. The final truth Machiavelli never wrote. We've covered a lot, but there's something darker we need to address. Safe. But there's one final truth that ties everything together. Machiavelli never wrote this explicitly, yet it's embedded in every page of his work. The only thing women truly want is a man who has conquered himself. Not conquered the world, not conquered other men, himself. A man who has looked at his own weakness and refused to be defined by it, who has walked through his fears instead of around them, who has discipline over his emotions, not because he suppresses them, but because he's processed them, who doesn't need external validation because he's done the internal work to know his own worth. Here's what most people miss about Machiavelli. He spent his entire life studying external power, thrones, armies, alliances, territory. But if you read between the lines, you'll see something. Every leader who failed because of an internal weakness, arrogance, insecurity, paranoia, dependency on others' approval. And every leader who succeeded did so because they mastered themselves first, before they attempted to master their world.
The same principle applies to attraction. You can learn every technique, every strategy, every psychological trick in the book. But if you haven't done the work on yourself, it's all hollow. Women see through tactics. They always have. What they can't see through is genuine transformation. A man who has genuinely become strong, disciplined, purposeful, self-aware, doesn't need tricks. His presence communicates everything. This is why the journey matters more than the destination. The process of building yourself, pushing through discomfort, developing your mind, your body, your skills, your emotional intelligence. That process shapes you into the kind of man who doesn't need to chase anyone, because you've become someone worth finding. Machiavelli would tell you this: the world rewards those who prepare in times of peace, so they're ready in times of war. In the context of your life, that means working on yourself now. Not when you're heartbroken, not when you've been rejected. Now. Build the discipline, build the mission, build the mental fortress. Because when the right person comes along, and they will, you'll be ready. Not because you learned some tricks, but because you became someone extraordinary. So let's bring this full circle. What do women actually want? They want what every human being wants. Strength they can trust. Depth they can explore. Purpose they can believe in. And a presence that makes them feel, without making them feel suffocated. Machiavelli spent his entire life decoding power. And the greatest power he ever identified? It wasn't military might. It wasn't political cunning. It was self-mastery. The man who controls himself controls his world. And the man who controls his world naturally attracts those who want to orbit it. Here's what that means in practice. Stop chasing. Start building. Stop performing to impress. Start becoming someone worth knowing.
Stop asking what women want, and start asking what kind of man you need to be. Because when you answer that second question honestly, and then do the brutal work to become him, the first question answers itself. Machiavelli's real secret was never about women being complicated. It's that most men are lazy. Lazy with their growth. Lazy with their purpose. Lazy with the uncomfortable work of self-development. And then they're shocked when reality doesn't hand them what they want. Don't be that man. Be the man Machiavelli would have written about. Not the prince who inherited power, the prince who earned it. Not the man who got lucky, the architect who built his own empire from the ruins of his old self. Because here's the truth they'll never tell you in school, in church, or on those dating podcasts. The only person standing between you and the life you actually want is the version of you that's too comfortable to change. The version that would rather scroll than strategize, rather complain than create, rather blame the world than build something worth defending. If this shifted something in you,